Shabbat. As was mentioned earlier, it's a very special one with our three Sefer Torah and our Rosh Chodesh and our Shabbat and so on. We're paying for Adar, but we're very lucky this evening to have with us Edwin Shuker. Good evening, Edwin.
Good evening, Shavua Tov.
Shavua Tov, Shavua Tov. I've known Edwin for a very long time. I met him through our mutual friend who we miss very much, Maureen Kendler. And as you know, everybody, Edwin is the Vice President of the Board of Deputies. And he's a London-based international businessman with a wide range of interests. He's also a trustee for Mitzvah Day and Sephardi Voices, and the International Advisory Council of Limmud, which is helping for Limmud to develop and so on. And he's a public speaker and activist on issues of Jews from Arab countries, and you'll find out why right now. And regularly delivers presentations on Middle Eastern topics at venues including the House of Commons, European Parliament, United Nations. And Edwin is done a lot of different things in his life, and is so important, I think, and central for our community in terms of his story and what he does. And I'm so glad that the Board of Deputies is not Ashken normative now, and obsessed with Ashkenazim, and understands that Sephardi backgrounds and heritage is so fundamental to our community. So Edwin, we're going to talk about a few different things tonight, about your story, which I think people really need and important to hear, and about your involvement with interfaith dialogue, and especially with Arab-speaking peoples and so on, Arabic-speaking peoples from different countries. And then we're going to talk about your recent experiences as well. So Edwin, good evening, and tell us a bit about your story, which we're discussing on Friday, which is so fascinating. Welcome and share with us.
Thank you. So I was born on July 23rd, 1955 in Baghdad, Iraq. And that defined my vision and my identity, really. I was born to a community that dwindling from the magnificent Babylonian Iraqi Jewish community. So my story really has its roots 2,600 years ago, when the temple was destroyed by the king Nebuchadnezzar. He brings in captives by foot to Babylon, the Jews of the kingdom of Judea. And there they sit and weep by the rivers of Babylon, as we all know. So that's where we started. And my story really resembles that of millions of Jews from Arab countries. So in 1948, there were 856,000 Jews living in the Arab countries. And now there's about 3,000, 4,000 people. So basically there was an ethnic cleansing exercise, displacing all these communities, robbing them of all their assets, their landmarks, their shrines, their prophets. But I was oblivious to this when I was born, because the big aliyah, the major shift, was in 1951. So in 1951, the vast majority of these 856,000 were flown in either by Ezra and Nehemiah or by magic carpet or whichever way it is, and were actually arrived to Israel, to the young state of Israel, doubling its size, but Israel did not have enough space for them. So basically my grandparents and my uncles and my aunts, they were all put in tents. 4 years, my grandparents were in tents. But throughout the Arab world, in that period, about 8% remained behind after the big aliyah. Individuals, like my father, he was doing a degree in university and thought, you know what, I'll join my parents and my siblings later. My mother, on her own, all her brothers and sisters have gone. And in Iraq, about 8,000 remained from 150,000 people. But by the time I was born, the message came from Israel, guys, don't rush, because we are in tents, we've got ration. So stay around in Iraq for a while and then come later. And of course, later lasted. So when I was born, life was really good, because the 8,000 basically were inheriting, so to speak, the 150,000, which have big houses, we've got businesses, maids, butler we had at home. Life, as the film Remember Baghdad, which I will talk about later, was paradise, so to speak.
It wasn't, in terms of like the religious institutions, there was, with 8,000, there was enough to have, community and a rabbi and kashrut and all that stuff?
Yes. So 8,000 is a sizable sum.
Yeah.
We had everything. We had so in 1950, Rabbi, there was 54 synagogues in Baghdad alone.
Right.
So of course, by the time I grew up, there were 4 that were left open. But we had 400 Sefer Torah from all these
Oh,
places. Yeah. So so the schools, the Jewish community of Iraq are very well known for their schools system. But by the time I grew up, there were 2, and I'm talking now until this paradise lasted until 1963 when I was 8 years old, and then it changed overnight. And for the first time, I, as a child of 8, knew what is anti-Jewish sentiments. What is when the mob turn against you, when the government turns against you, what we call here anti-Semitism. But it happened so overnight and so quickly. So in 1963, we were all asked to queue and bring with us the Iraqi ID cards. So in the heat of Baghdad, we were queuing day after day, and you hand over the Iraqi ID card, and instead you get this one. So you get a yellow card, specially and exclusively for the Jew. And from then on, life became completely different. And as we approached the 67 war, the Israel-Arab war, things were turning so nasty. We couldn't leave. We were kicked out of public work. Universities will not accept. I mean, small things like, I remember us dressing up as a family and going to our social club in Baghdad, and there was a sign saying Jews are no longer welcome, and sort of humiliatingly just.
So what caused the changes majorly?
Well, after 63, first of all, after 63, which was the military coup that brought the Ba'ath Party for the first time, it was very easy to identify the Jews. Here is his card, here's his yellow card. Anywhere you go, bank or driving or whatever. So now you are very easily identified. Secondly, the sentiments before the war, that was the 67 war. There was like a months and months beforehand inciting to throw Israel into the sea, right. and de facto became a sort of a Jewish hunt as well, because how can you explain what is Israel? So you explain it through Hezkel and Naim and all the Jews that they know. So we were targeted, we were in the newspapers, we were on television. And then the lowest point of my life was January 1969, after Saddam Hussein came to power. And on January 27th, we woke up and we were told that there was no school, no businesses. Today, it's a national holiday. And I remember me and my sisters dancing, so happy that we all dressed up, but we don't have to go to school. And then came at 9 o'clock the announcement. The reason why this holiday is because the Iraqi authorities caught a spy ring, and the spy ring were arrested, they confessed, they were tried, they were sentenced to death, they were hanged in prison that morning, and we were listening to this sequence. And then they said, and the reason why the holiday is because their bodies now were taken, the 14 people were hanged, and their bodies were taken to the public square of Baghdad, Saht al-Tahrir, and to Basra, and they hanged there the whole day. And then the names came up one after the other, and out of 14, there were 10 Jews, 10 innocent Jews, 10 Jews who were taken away from their families. Two youngsters were 17-year-olds. They didn't even say goodbye. And the next thing is that their family seeing them hanging. And I mean, of course, this was, my mother went hysterical. Imagine these people that we know or know their children, they were wrapped in a white linen with the word Jew on the front, and the back they had their full name and full address. It was an extremely low point, and it followed after that weeks and weeks and weeks of people being picked up from the street and never to be heard again. Altogether, 50 people were killed, taken from a small community. And finally, in 1971, life became like hell, and we had to do something. And my father, like the rest of the community, found a way to escape by using forged papers, leaving the house as if we were going on a picnic, because every Jewish house was watched. So you would leave in, we took the car and just parked it there, left it there, and then took a route towards going to the north of Iraq, where the Kurdish enclave was there. Although Kurdistan was part of Iraq, but there was a conflict and a sort of a civil war. And we managed to get to the Kurds, and they actually managed to smuggle us into Iran and into freedom. And from Iran, we came to this country as asking for asylum. We had no papers, we had nothing, and we were granted asylum. We came here as refugees, and we rebuilt our lives very quickly, like Jewish people do throughout the last thousands of years. Wherever they go, they start again and become loyal to the country that hosts them and give them refuge.
Had you considered in 71 to go to Israel with the family that was there, or it wasn't like that?
No, we always grew up in Iraq on the British system, the A levels and the O levels, and we had relatives there, and it was always, you know, a kind of a vision that we want to be in England. So,
and you spoke English from a kid. You were.
I mean, school English in our Jewish school. We were taught 4 languages at the same time. We were Hebrew, French, Arabic, and English.
Wow.
It was, one of the from childhood.
Okay.
From childhood. Yeah.
So 1 second here. I've got I can't hear. 1 second. That's my headphones are playing up now. I've got to turn them off, so I can't hear you. Sorry. Okay, I can hear you now. Sorry, Edward. Yeah, I can hear you now. So it's my fault. There's something going on with my computer. Okay, right. So you're in England and you're building, right? And you came here with your parents and your siblings, all of you.
Yep. We had the escape was my father, my mother, to my 2 younger sisters, and my grandmother, my mother's mother, and okay, we all came to.
Right, now I want to hear your story here in terms of your involvement with interfaith and the other issues that you started getting involved in, and your return, as you say, to Iraq that you told me about.
Right. So when I came here, I one simple sentence changed my life. I was giving a talk about Iraq. So I first of all, I came in here. I did my A levels. I went to Leeds University. And in Leeds University, actually, something happened right day one, because I arrived there the day after Yom Kippur War, and I still had the fear of God about being Jewish. I was petrified. And suddenly I saw hundreds of Arabs students in Leeds, and they came in and they said, "Oh, you speak Arabic? I can see you are Iraq. And what are you Muslim?" And I just, out of being so petrified, I said, "No, I'm not Muslim. They said, "So what are you then?" I said, I don't, you know, I said, "Well, you know, if you're a Christian, it doesn't matter. We are all, this is a war against the Jews, and you're welcome to join it." And then suddenly I find myself joining the Arab Society with about 200, watching war movies, watching this, you know, what they thought will be the end of Israel. And God. I'm sitting there, and you know what, Rabbi, I actually lived for most of the 3 years as an Arab, joining the Arab Society at the end, because after a while there was no way I could just come up after 2 months and said, "Hey, excuse me, I was a Jew and I was just pretending not to be there." So
you didn't get involved with the Jewish Society or anything? You kept away from it?
Absolutely no, absolutely, just completely part of the Arab Society. And in a way that was a defining thing for me and for my interfaith work as well later on, because I was on the other side. I saw what the other side is thinking and what the other side feeling, and the fear, that fear barrier that one would have actually disappeared, because I knew exactly what it was on the other side. So I was giving a talk, and then somebody said to me, "Oh, this is fascinating." It was a sub-editor of a national paper. He said, "This is fascinating, but I didn't know there were Jews in Iraq." And that defining sentence came to me like a bolt, really. And I just screamed inside me that here it is. The eyewitness, the one who spent 16 years of my first 16 years being there, I who saw what I saw, who saw the synagogues and the shrines and the 6 biblical prophets and all that. And within my lifetime, my people have been almost wiped off the narrative of the Middle East. So because certainly in Iraq, all the Jewish contribution over these thousands of years were never mentioned at that time anymore. And even in Israel, even in Europe, even in Jewish schools here, people did not know our story.
So you were part of an Ashkenazi community after you come back from Leeds and growing up and getting married and everything. You were part of Ashkenazi community. You weren't involved in stuff.
Well, this is I was, but there was very little knowledge and very little opportunity in these years. I mean, you even like today when I go to speak in the Hasmonean or the Jewish schools, most of the people have not heard about the Oriental Jews and the Mizrahi Jews and those who wrote the Talmud and who lived. I mean, I want you to imagine the Iraqi Jewish community lived 2,600 years, keeping its identity intact, its Jewish identity intact for 2,600 years while living as a tiny minority within a place, a rough neighborhood, what they call. You know, they had the Mongols and the Mongols and the Greeks and the Ottomans and the Arabs, and all these people come in, and yet the Jew managed to stay as a unit and to stay with its identity and to go back home, to go back to Jerusalem as a community, almost as a community. In 1951, almost went back. It's absolutely remarkable, and I'm always so proud of it, and I want to talk about it. And yet, I took it upon myself, almost as a personal responsibility, that I am not going to sit and watch my ancestors' contribution just simply disappear from the face of the earth. And so in 2003, when I had the first chance, as soon as Saddam was overcame and the Americans were there was me taking a plane and going to Baghdad in these heady days by September. And I did Rosh Hashanah. I think it was probably the last Rosh Hashanah with a minyan in Baghdad since Nebuchadnezzar. You know, it was very emotional, very emotional.
And you recognize the place? You were things around, it changed a lot in terms of
no, it didn't. It actually didn't change a lot, which is the tragedy. I mean, I traced it took me time to find my home. It was very emotional journey. I asked them to drop me in a place where I would know, like in between my school and my home. And then I started trying to say, right, well, this street and that street. And then finally there I was in front of my home, the home I grew up in. And I was taking so many pictures. And then suddenly somebody comes out of the house and he said, "You stop." He said, "Don't move. Why are you taking pictures of my home, of my house?" And I said, "Oh, I said I'm a lover of architecture. I went to London. I was in exile. Now that we are free, I'm back to Iraq and I'm enjoying taking the pictures." He said, "Well, why don't you come inside the house? And if you are such a thing." And I was following him, and my heart was beating. You know, I left that house in August 17, 1971. And I left it like a criminal. I left it with a little bag. I left everything in there, my pictures, my certificates, because anything with a name in, we could not take with us. Right. And then here I am, stepping back into that house. And then he turned around, he said, he realized that he wasn't a fool. He said, "This is not my house." I said, "I don't know anything." He said, There were Jews living here before. So I'm like just completely looking at him blank. And he said, yeah, there were Jews living here before, but we've been living since then. And, I thought, this is getting a bit hairy. So I said to him, my family waiting for me now. Why don't I come tomorrow and we sit and have a coffee? And he said, yeah, I'll make sure you come tomorrow. I don't think I've been to that street since then.
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. And so that first trip made you feel you want to really focus on this issue of recognizing the Jewish community there. And tell me about all the meetings you've been having with different groups of like what your aim is in interfaith in terms of, well, I'm actually not sure it's even interfaith, it's kind of interculture. Like what's your agenda? What are you trying to do?
Okay, so I don't have agendas normally. Somebody described my life as a hot air balloon, which moves where I feel my next mission is, or where I feel my calling is. This is certainly all the story of Iraq and this thing is definitely not an agenda. It's more of as I said, I feel my responsibility. I feel the call, and one of it is to actually explain to the European Jewry, to British Jews, to the Ashkenazi world, to Israel even, to how we lived. How did Jews in the Arab world lived for so long as a minority? I remember certainly in the 20th century, we lived extremely well. We lived in beautiful houses on the river. We have this one, of course. We had the Farhud and the pogrom of the Nazi one. But overall, when you look at over all that time, we were in a very good shape on the 20th century. And education, we had houses, we had homes, we had really, and you say, well, how did you manage it? How did you, all these years, we're not attacked, we're not wiped off like many people, like many minorities, all across the whole world, all these empires. Where are these empires now? How come that Jewish element?
Because the experience of Jews in Europe was to move around, often, of persecution and often being exiled. But you're saying
the Jews of Babylon never moved. They actually were stuck in that tiny little space near Babylon. We're still like about 100 kilometers from Babylon. That's all we moved in our, Baghdad. That's where Baghdad is. And there really is actually a language that we developed between the Jew and between the Arab, especially the last 1400 years. Right. And that language served both sides immaculately. So the Arab is the one with the sword, the wazir, the prime minister, the army, the staff, and the Jew is the creative force, the sort of the wealth producers, the civil servants who are loyal. Like Yirmiyahu told them when they first arrived, Yirmiyahu said, "What are you sitting weeping by the rivers of Babylon? Get up and buy gardens and plant them, get your kids married. But above all," he said, "pray for the peace and the prosperity of wherever you are exiled." And that is the motto that every Jewish wave of immigration, whether it's in America, whether it's in Europe, or whether it's in Iraq, have always followed. So Jews in all the Arab countries were so loyal to the country, to the governor of the country, to the people of the country, that they managed to show to the aggressors or to the invading forces that it's better to keep these people alive and well, and because they create blessings, they create wealth. And that comes my message. If you want to know my inner message is what Kadosh Baruch Hu Hashem said to Abraham and afterwards to Jacob. You will be a blessing. This is, I will never move from there. I don't think God, if you read what he said, you will be a blessing just by being there. And that's what happens. Even if there are 5 Jews in Iraq or 6 Jews or 800 Jews in Tunisia, this is, and the Arab world and the neighboring world realize this and actually acknowledge that. And wherever you go, they say to you, when the Jew left, the blessing, the barakah left with them. And they say that in Spain and
Edwin, so
Portugal.
explain about this, because you're in your business trips now. You've done a lot of business and been to Arab countries and meeting a lot. So that's what we're talking about now. So this is kind of the updating of this cultural relationship between the Arab and the Jew. So tell me more of those stories when you do your business there, and the way they look at you. You said so they say that bracha left when the Jews left, and are they? What's the relationship now with them?
Well, it depends where. I mean, as we all see what happened in the last few months. That is I tell you a story. So 20 years ago, I went to Dubai, and I talked to the prince there, and I said, I want to bring a group of interfaith Jews who love to make peace with yourselves, and they talk Arabic. They are like, you know, and I said, this is what he said, and he said something that is so educational to me. He said, he looked at me in the eyes and he said, we don't do peace here. I was like, oh my God, what does that mean? And he said, you know what? Bring investors, bring wealth producers. This is the blessings that Jews do. Don't bring me people who talk about peace. So, because in the middle, he said to me, we share interest, and really the presence of the Jew had been such an incredibly positive thing to the development of the place. That's the people I want you to bring wealth producers. And that's what happened today in Dubai and in the Arab Emirates and the Bahrain and in Morocco. Jews are going back to becoming wealth producers. But now, I always said, you know, the book of exile is closed, right? The last chapter had been written. There is hardly any Jews left now. There's 4 in Iraq. There are 0 in Algeria, 0 in Libya, just Tunisia and Morocco. A few hundred people, about 2,500 people probably in Morocco. So I say a new book has opened up, the book of blessing, the book of post-exile. Now we are now, Israel is the home. It's in the right place, in the heart of the Middle East, where it always was, in the place that Hashem said, I will bring you back exactly to there. And now we need the second book, the book that comes in now, not from while we were in exile and minorities, but actually Israel becoming the source of this blessing.
And would you say you've got friends in your business associates that you work there? They're actually, there's common business interests, and I understand that and appreciate that. And would you say it's actual friendship? There's an understanding and appreciation of Jewish culture and who Jews are, or it's much, or there's a bit of tension? How would you say in your experience?
Well, absolutely no tension. There are, of course, the part of the Arab world which is dominated at the moment and almost, I would say, occupied by Iran. So all the incitement against the Jew, all the incitement against Israel is coming from the non-Arab. It's coming from the Persians in Iran, and for a reason. Iran had never had any problem with Israel, had no borders with Israel, have always had a great relationship. But since the Islamic Revolution, this has become their way of dominating the area. And that is in Lebanon and in Syria and in Iraq and in Yemen. I mean, I can't believe the international community. I mean, the Houthis in Yemen, their flag says, curse the Jews, not Israel, not Zionism, curse the Jews. It's the flag. And yet the new American administration, Biden's administration, are taking them out of the terrorism and actually trying to ease into them without even asking them, what the hell are you doing? Putting a curse the Jew on your flag. But other than the Iranian malignant, malicious influence, the Arab world is firmly now into almost fantasy land, thinking, oh, Jew, please come back. We remember how the Arab world was in the 1940s and the 50s, leading the world, a cosmopolitan, Baghdad, Beirut, Cairo. These are these are magnificent cities, and now they are, Baghdad today is literally the worst city in the world, by bar none. It's 169 in the capital thing. It's actually a tip, a rubbish tip, and you know what? I do believe that the Jewish influence had a great in making these things, in having a civil society, in having civil servants, all the things like the trains and the post office and the botanic gardens and everything that the British normally bring, they all were run completely by Jews.
Wow. Okay, so I see that. So right, so you're saying, so they're obviously the Iranian, because of that, because it's religious issue is challenging, but our other nations we've talked about are welcoming, and you've got friends and you meet them regularly when you visit on trips. Would you call it friendships?
I have hundreds and hundreds of very, very close friendship that I treasure. I have in Iraq itself. I speak I send messages, video messages through the social networks, and because for them to hear an actual Jew, of course, 90% or more have never seen a Jew. Iraqis, all young people, they haven't seen a Jew in their lives, and suddenly this Jew speaks to them in Arabic and talk about missing home and talking about buying a home in Iraq, which I did in 2015, and saying I want to continue my ancestors' link. I want to continue that relationship. I want to continue to be a blessing, and even though I need nothing from you, I want that relationship, and I want to tell. And this is something that really plays into their heart. I said, I want to tell my children where they came from, who are their ancestors, where are their prophets buried. I don't want to tell my children that they were born in Finchley. I don't want to. I want to tell them, like I'm so proud. I want to tell them who their ancestors are and how proud they should be.
And other Jews in this community here in England, other Baghdadi Jews or sympathetic Jews are interested in this issue as well, and your family's reaction, how's that been?
It's I mean, I am, in a way, I go to extreme in order to make a point. So for example, my mother doesn't want to hear a word in Arabic, doesn't want to know anything. So you say to my mom, tell me what, when we were in Baghdad and suddenly the state of Israel was announced in 1948, how did you, and she would look at me and she said, my memory starts in 1971.
Right.
And she would not go beyond that.
Right.
And I came back, I came back so excited, showing her the pictures of the house we lived in, and she doesn't want to see it. She doesn't want to see it. So yes, there are many like her, but I am absolutely, I want to talk about the film Remember Baghdad, which was done in 2015.
Yes. Right.
Which actually was funded and sponsored by the Dangour Education. David Dangour was incredible, always is in that sort of line. Was directed by Fiona Murphy. And I parachuted in. It's a story about 6 people. And Fiona wanted it to be a sensational film in order to revive the story and to make it something that we could show in Jewish. We couldn't just show pictures of 1940 and this one. So I said to her, I said, I'll take a crew and we go to Baghdad, and I did. So in 2015, I actually went to Baghdad with a film crew, local one, and went to my home, and I went to the synagogue, and I went to I went to the shrines, as I said, Yecheskel, Ezra, Nahum, Daniel, Yonah, all these people are buried not in Israel, they are in Iraq. Sheikh Ishaq, and they're all by the way, up to 2003, Saddam, even including Saddam period, no one touched it. No one, everything was kept absolutely. It's only recently, with the Iranian influence, that we have the real farhud, the real robbery of the assets that were frozen, they are changing the faces of the prophets. They're making Yecheskel place into a Shiite mosque. So So that's only recently. But I do believe in my message, and I do believe, and I'm ready to take that risk, and I'm ready to go there year after year. And in 2015, in order to make the film even more sensational, I announced that I actually bought a house. I couldn't buy a house in Baghdad, but I bought a house in Erbil in North Iraq. And I said, here is the house that will be in 20, 30, 40, 50 years, the beginning of the second book of blessings, where I don't foresee necessarily Jews taking, I'm not going to take my children and Esther, who's watching here, I'm not take her into Baghdad Central and start a new life. But it is the beginning. And I want to remind you that what's happening today in Eastern Europe, if you go to Germany now, there's 330,000 Jews who live there. Right. And Ukraine,
Europe, absolutely.
And Ukraine, who is visited by 160,000 people, for Rabbi Nachum and all these things, and these were unimaginable in the 40s. And when you compare the sacrifices that we gave in Europe to that of Iraq and the Arab world, there really is no comparison. We didn't lose 6 million people in the Arab world, and nowhere near it.
I know.
And there wasn't that systematic, institutionalized anti-Semitism in there.
No, there's the desire of some to look back and see it as memory, right? So they want to see Europe as the cemetery of the Jewish people, but it's not right. There is Jewish life in Europe, and you're saying similarly in Arab lands, fundamental.
Yes.
We were planning to, before lockdown, everything to bring you and to show the movie at Central Square, but and hopefully we'll do that afterwards. But are there other ways to get hold of the movie and to see it?
Yes, actually, you can see it online. If you say Remember Baghdad, I think if you can see the Arabic translation, subtitles with it, because that's the one we put in. If you have any problem, please connect with me.
I'll leave you. Which website? If you just put Remembering Baghdad movie, it'll come up, or
Remember Baghdad. Just put Remember Baghdad, the film. Yeah,
fantastic. And now, Edwin, there's also something that's happened very recently, which we were talking about on Friday, which I want you to spend a few minutes sharing with us because it was interesting. Your experience having been, as you said, growing up in Baghdad, and then the whole story of fiction, then going back, and now under COVID. What happened to you in the last few weeks, Edwin?
Okay, so I had tested positive in January, and I just thought, like, I will be isolating and it will just pass. As it happens, I bought one of these little gadgets that test the oxygen in your blood.
On the finger, the oximeter.
Yeah, that's it, the oximeter. Yeah. And while I was at home, sort of began the self-isolation, began being in a separate room and eating in plastic. I remember the gadget, and I remember measuring, and I remember it was 84. And I was telling Eyal, my son, I said, I measured 84. And I think he looked up and he said, Dad, I think you should be dead by now.
Yes, so it should be over 90. Should be over 90, 95.
I called 111, and they said, look, we probably don't have time to send you, because ambulances are late. Just get your wife to bring you to Barnet, and we are waiting for you.
Right.
And what I told you on Friday is these 3 days that I felt I was in. First of all, you are in a war zone. You are arriving there, and there's no beds, and you're sitting in a chair, and you look around, and there's another people being brought in, another 5 people in your room. The ambulances are bringing them. And I need to, it's difficult for me to share that experience, but it's so raw and existential that all the work that I do in interfaith and all the things I do at the board and all that, just everything just disappears, because you look at people and there's no longer all you want is to breathe. All you want is to actually live for another minute, and you see the others are in a similar position. There's no question what color they are, what religion they are. You are one here, and all of you just want to live. And actually to see the pressure on the national health and the way they're coping with it, it's something where I would never ever forget. the young doctors doing this day in, day out for a year now, walking into this one and looking at these people, and all of them need help, and all of them need a bed and all that sort of thing. But anyway, Baruch Hashem, it seems to be now on its way to completely going down. But the experience will stay with me, and I think it's a I not think it was a life-changing experience, and I'm going to change my life accordingly.
Wow. Well, Edwin, you're a very passionate man, and we're very lucky to have you in our community. And your message, I can see that that Edward put up the website about remembering Baghdad, and these are important stories to understand. You know, our community often can be quite Ashkenazi-centered or not understanding the past. And your point, which I never really thought about as well, which is comparing about the return of Jewish life to Europe, and similarly the return of Jewish life to Baghdad and to Arab countries, and going to the next generation, not living in the memory of the past. And it's a Jews have to redefine themselves in a new kind of way in understanding our relationship to the world. And many people aren't ready for that. You know, they like to see, you know, they like to understand Jewish history as opposed to modernity in a different kind of way. And what you're doing is pushing people to look at it in different kinds of ways. And you've told me many stories, I know you can't share them all, of your meetings with Arab leaders and businessmen, and attitude towards Jews and attitude towards Israelis. And it's fascinating for me. So do the talks that you do you talk to Israelis as well about these issues, or it's mainly in this country? Or what kind of talks?
Oh, first of all, I absolutely love Jewish people. I love them, every one of them. The you know, my experience at the board, I was not ready for it. It was about 3 years ago, almost exactly 3 years ago from today, that I was supporting a very dear friend who was standing for the presidency of the Board of Deputies, and he had booked Jewish News and Jewish Chronicle to announce his candidacy, and I offered to be his campaign manager, one of them. And then 5 minutes before, he said to me, "I have to tell you something very important." I said, "What do you mean? The press will be here to hear you." He said, "No, I have to say something very important." He said, "I'm not going to run." And I said, "What?" He said, "Yeah, I'm not going to run." Okay. Then he said, "Look, the press is here. Why don't you run? Why don't you declare your candidacy?" I mean, honest to God, this is how it came.
It happened. Oh.
I was absolutely, I said, oh my God. I said, "I need 20 minutes. And he said, "No, you haven't got 20 minutes. You've got like 4 minutes." And I did. I mean, like I said, it was just, this is how everything worked in my life. And I said, I will stand for the presidency of the board. It's a new world, Rabbi, the last 3 years. I did not know the length and breadth of where the Jews of Britain live and how they think, and I never was into that. I was a businessman. I did my own projects. If I want to do something, I pay for it, and I'm running it. And right. Suddenly, I'm now, the last 3 years, vice president of the Board of Deputies, working with Marie van der Zyl, doing a fabulous job. But it is a structured, organized British institution, 260 years old.
And you still like Jews, Edwin? You still like Jews after 3 years with the board?
And I had no idea how passionate Jews are, and how literally, as President Weizmann of Israel said before, and as the joke says it, each one of those deputies, each one of those 300 deputies knows and feels and speaks as if he is the president of the board. And that's our strength, and that's how we, in all the isms around the world, you know, the Jew is always there, for good, for bad, for whatever. He's there with his passion and with his energy. So my passion and energy is just a continuation of that, Rabbi.
Well, we're glad to have you. I've got lots more I want to ask you, but I want to open up now to everybody else if they want to. If people either want to write in the chat,
Rabbi,
I'll save it at the end for your. Yes, we'll take a couple of questions,
one
and there's a final story I know you want to tell. So a couple of questions to people, either if you want to unmute or send it in the chat.
Edwin, Martin Kurzer.
Hey, Martin.
Hi, Edwin. That was a fantastic talk. Thank you. Very inspirational. Are you truly optimistic about the Jews future in the Middle East? I mean, there's nice early beginnings.
Sorry, there are no. You mean the contribution of the Jews?
No, not the attitude of the surrounding nations. You said you've spoken to
towards the Jews or towards Israel?
Sorry, you're right. I didn't think it through. I was using the term synonymously. If you want to split it,
no,
yeah, the attitude to Israel and the attitude to Jews. The between the two.
Yes, I mean, again, I'm not talking in months and years. I'm talking in decades.
Okay.
But if I was twice in Dubai and Abu Dhabi in December, and I want to tell you, in Dubai, I had a choice of 3 Orthodox services, minyanim, when I haven't been to shul here for several months. But there I had 3, each one with its great kiddush. And that is an absolutely genuine opening of that area, the Bahrainis, the without any conditions, without anything, just complete, total welcome, and no ulterior motives, just actually remembering the blessing of the Jew. I'm more than optimistic. I'm saying this is something that is inevitable. It is inevitable that the Jew will go back and give his blessing to Morocco, to Tunisia, and in time to Iraq and to Syria. It's inevitable. It's our mission. Our mission is to give. God gives blessings through us, and even to all the nations. And it is not just our privilege, but it is our responsibility to deliver them.
Fascinating.
It took 500 years for Portugal and Spain, but look at them. Please come back. Here's passports. Here's citizenship. Come back and bring me back what you did before.
From Spain, absolutely. Yeah, you're pushing people to look forward and not look backward. Do you have other questions people want to ask?
Yes. Hi, Edwin. Shavua Tov, Israel.
Oh my God.
No, not my God.
No.
I'm Israel.
No.
Not my God.
No.
We've known each other for years. We've been on trips together to Azerbaijan, Uzbekistan, and everything else. Edwin, I just came in now and I've forgotten that you are speaking tonight. Now, did you mention all the papers of the Iraqi community which were recovered by the American troops in Basra?
No, I have not. No, I have not.
You have not, which are presently in various Jewish museums in America. But there is a whole to-do because the American government is saying they want to send all the paperwork back to Iraq, to Baghdad, because that's where they belong. So what is being done about it?
Rafi, am I finishing now? Do you want me to tell this story and another one? Or do
if you answer Israel and then we'll do the story.
I will answer Israel with a story.
Okay, fine. Yes. So
are there any questions? Other questions?
Unless there's more questions, it's a final story from Edwin. So we'll answer that. Israel, he'll answer that with your story. But are there other questions first?
Edwin, I have a question. It's me, Margaret. Hello. Hi, Edwin.
Margaret, then Ben. Okay, go on.
I just wanted to say that how amazingly wonderful it is to see Edwin. I know how ill he was. And it's amazingly wonderful to see Israel Weinstock together with Edwin Shuker, because I cannot remember how many years ago it was that we were in Turkey. It was a long time ago. And I've seen your progress ever since then, Edwin. And it's
We've lost you.
Wonderful to seeing Israel Weinstock. We go back a long way. I see you both, actually.
Fantastic.
Right. So I will finish.
No, I think there's just one more from Ben, and then we'll do that. Ben Tobin, go on.
Yeah, Edwin, hi. Israel had very good relationships with the Shah before the Islamic Revolution in Iran. It's fantastic that Israel's making peace deals now with the Arab countries, but they're making them with governments which might be perceived by the people in those countries as equally authoritarian. Is there a risk that if those governments are overthrown, as they were in Iran, that the whole house of cards comes tumbling down? Or are there efforts
Wait.
being made to make sure that the benefits spread to the people in those countries?
Actually, if you know the system in the United Arab Emirates and in Bahrain, they are not dictatorship. They will not fall. This is a system, a tribal system, which will remain. It is as democratic as it can be, short of having somebody going and putting a vote in. So they are actually. I don't have any doubt that these tribal societies will carry on being the same way, and there will be no sort of overthrown by armies and all that sort of thing. If you know how it works, then I'm absolutely confident in these places. Other places, I mean, Iran itself can change with a change of a regime, but this is a political question that I love to have a big talk about it, because I know a lot about that part of the world and how it works, but I know that we are pressed for time, and I want to finish with two stories.
Okay. So let's hear the stories. But I just want to say it's been fascinating for me. You know, I'm a big fan of ancient, the Tanakh stories and the ancient biblical world, and you know the return to Bavel and relations with Shushan and all these different areas. And you know, Jews. Ezra was from Bavel, and you know the Tanakh stories are in these places, and to see them as places we can visit again and build Jewish life and have relationships, for me is absolutely fascinating. And to not see it as the ancient past, but as you're saying, instead of, even though you know Galut might have finished, but this new era of bracha, I really like. It's really beautiful. So over to you for your final stories. Thank you, Edwin.
Okay. So first of all, Israel, which I wasn't going to tell that story, but I can't say no to Israel ever. So in 2003, an Iraqi official came to the Americans, the American army, and says, "I will show you a treasure with tens of thousands of Jewish artifacts. In return, you give me asylum in America." So they actually went to check his story, and in the cellar of the huge intelligence building in central Baghdad, he said to them, "Go to the cellar and find it." And they went in there, and there was a colossal bomb that didn't explode, that cut through the whole building, destroyed all the water system, but it didn't explode. So when they went to the cellar, it was 5 feet in dirty water. And Harold Rode, who was an Orthodox Jew leading that thing, picked up from the floor of the water, and he was seeing Sefer Torah and Talmud and documents, and the miracles began, whereby Harold sat there, called his general, and said, "Could we drain this?" And the general says, "This is we are an American army in war. We're not a drainage company." You know. So at that second, Natan Sharansky calls from Israel. We all know Harold. I was calling him as well. And Harold, what's happening in Baghdad? Tell us this one. And Harold said to him, "Natan, the history of your people is disappearing in front of my eyes in dirty water. Can you do something?" And then a series of miracles. So Natan called somebody big in America, and that somebody big called the National Archives of America, which never deals with anything other than American ones. They sent a 747 freezer. The whole plane has got container freezers. They froze all this documentation like rocks into -20, -30. They transport the whole plane to Texas, and it took 10 years for them to announce the end of the result of their work. And there were 27,000 documents, of which 93% were saved and digitized and preserved word for word. It's an incredible story on the net. You can watch it directly. And the letters and everything like that. And then the small percent that they couldn't do it, they had a burial for a proper one in New York, with even the Iraqi ambassador came there, and that was the fascinating story. But like Israel said, the reason that when the Americans took these treasure. They signed a paper to the Iraqis saying, this, we are only doing it to preserve it, and we commit ourselves to bring it back. And that sentence, that agreement is on our necks, basically. And every year and every change of State Department, suddenly somebody comes in and says, this has to go back now. And it's an impossible.
Want to do with it? What do they actually want to do with it?
Right, nothing. But the Iraqis see that as a national pride. You know, this is ours, and we want it back, and we don't want we don't want to lose our own treasures. They're gonna probably put it back in the cellar, same cellar as the one came out, but it becomes a national thing. So it's a constant fight. Finally, we made an agreement with the Iraqi government that as long as it is being displayed in museums in America and people are watching it, it can be there on a loan. And we keep on extending that and hoping something will show up. But it's a very much a live issue, and very much a most fascinating story. Now for my last story. Okay. So I mentioned that we escaped. So the escape was obviously a major event in our lives. You actually embarking on a trip where many people failed, when people got lost in the mountains, in the desert. It was fraught with a lot of things that could go wrong. So my father went to the smuggler. The smuggler took a playing card, cut it in half, gave my father the half, and told him on the 17th of August, you set off Baghdad, and when you get to the Kurds, if you get to the Kurdish enclave, they will have the other half of the card, and they will be able to match, and they will be knowing that you are a bona fide Jew, and therefore they will work with you and smuggle you out. So the trip went like this, and finally we make it. Incredible events on the way, but anyway, we make it, and the Kurds put us in a car, in a pickup lorry, through the mountains, and without a light. Even the cars did not have a light. Total and absolute darkness. The valleys are behind us, and at one stage we actually got near the cliff, and the car we had to evacuate one by one without the car falling into the valley. So the people held it and were taking us all out of the car until they replaced it. Finally, we make it. The guy who drove us tell us to get off because this is Iran now, and our people will come and pick us up, even though it was dark, because he had to run back to our journey before the sun rises. And then he picks me up. I was 16 plus, and he looks at me in the eye and he said, my name is Masoud Barazani. Masoud Barazani I am the son of Mullah Mustafa Barazani, who is the Ben Gurion of the Kurdish people, the freedom fighter. And he said to me, every time you talk about your escape and your Iraq thing, you've got to promise me you talk about how the Kurdish people smuggled you out for no money, for no expenses, just because they love Jews and they love humanity. And I kept my word, and I'm keeping my word now, and that's why I asked to say that story. But the follow-up is in 2005, 34 years later, I am back and forth in Iraq. Now I'm escorting an American congressman, Zichrono Bracha, Stephen Solas, a Jewish one, and I was translating for him, and we met the leadership of Iraq. He had his businesses, and finally one day he said to me, Edwin, tonight we're staying in a very special place, in the house of President Masoud Barazani, the very same guy who smuggled us out all these years, who drove us through, is now the president of all of Kurdistan and deputy prime minister of all of Iraq, one of the most powerful people in the country. And I said to him, Congressman, this is my story with Masoud, all these years ago. He was very, very touched. The next morning, me and the congressman, the president with his minister, the congressman speaking in English, I'm translating from English to Arabic, the minister from Arabic to Kurdish, just the four of us. We finish an hour later, the business, and the president says, I have to leave this instant. the people will take care of your congressman, of your affairs, and I have to go now. And he just barged out and left. And as he went to the door, suddenly the congressman started, Mr. President, give me 1 more minute of your time. And the president looked really annoyed. You know, he just gave us an hour. And he said to him, you met this man before, and I want him in 1 minute to tell you when and how. And still he was not that happy that he met me. So what? And I started saying, I had a 1 minute, and I started saying, my name is Edwin Shuker. I am one of the last Jews of Iraq. And in 1971, life resembled death. No one can save us. Not the international world, not America. We were just simply lambs for the slaughter. I said, except for the Kurdish people, the brave Kurdish people. And at that minute, he knew what was happening. So he just felt, he just stood next to the chair and stood steadying himself. And I carried on and I said, and when we, and the driver who took us risked his own life in total darkness and drove us and my family. And the minister was translating and rushing me. And I said, and he looked at me in the eye and he said, my name is Masoud Barazani. And I said that, the minister had no idea this is coming, no idea. And when I said it, he simply, honestly, literally collapsed and fell on the floor and started weeping and started making noises of emotional feelings that I carried on through his crying. And I was saying, President, 34 years later, I'm here to thank you on behalf of 1,900 Jews who your people have saved. And as I carried on, and I choked like I'm choking now. And as I choked, I looked around, and the congressman and the president and the minister, we were all choking with the same tears. And I wanted to finish with that story.
Wow, Edwin, that's just incredible. It's incredible. Thank you so much. You know, I mean, you've given us such joy and positive hope and looking forward and not just looking back. Thank you so much, Edwin. Thank you. Thank you. Your bracha to our people. Amen. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Incredible this week. Absolutely incredible. Unforgettable. And next week, we're continuing our connection with Israel. We have a Kalev Bender. Is that right, Edward, next week? Is that right?
Kalev Bender, absolutely, yep.
And he's going to be talking about Israeli politics. He's very involved in political issues in Israel. I love Kalev very much. He's a child of the community, a son of the community, and he's going to tell us, we're going to have some interesting political conversations there as well. So
with a month to go to the Israeli elections, he will be giving us some kind of a roadmap.
Yeah, because it's going to be completely obvious what's going to happen in the election, so it's really easy to work that one out. Absolutely, but absolutely, thank you for organising that. Thank you, everybody, and
thank you so much.
Yes, and Edwin, amazing as always, and we look forward to you in person, live in the shul, seeing the movie.
Amen. I'd love that.
Rafi Pinchas, is it going to be an overall view or Mr. Kalev's view? Because if it is, I don't think we should have it. If it's an overall view of the total spread of the parties or the